What's up everybody, Lambo here, and today I am back with a very spicy video with my honest opinions on all of the balance changes and all of the feedback that the community has given, and on how I think these changes will factor in to the balance of each non-mirror matchup. So in the first part, I'll go over the changes real quick, just look at it from a purely design perspective, so I'm completely gonna ignore how this affects balance, tell you how I like them or not, because I'm sure you have seen people go over these changes. I'll try to rapid fire through them, and then in the second part I'll go over the balance implications, and in the third part I'll go for some spicy opinions, some spicy responses to all the hot takes that the community had. So if you don't really care about the first part, you can skip through it. I have chapters in this video, so you can just see when the next part begins while you're scrolling through the bottom. And yeah, skip the first part. Anyway, let's get straight into it. The cyclone change I find really weird. So first of all, I think it's fantastic that we're allowed to do big changes like this. I don't think the mech needs something like a Hellion Cyclone. I don't think mech will be viable. Excuse me, I don't think mech will ever be viable against Protoss if you don't make the Cyclone too busted for lower levels. I don't think the Cyclone like this will make mech viable against Protoss. I think it makes it a lot better against Zerg, and that's not exactly the goal. So design-wise, I think they fail what they want to achieve with this. I also think the Cyclone is fine as a kind of specialized unit, as an early game defense, and against Zerg it fulfills the mobile mech army part. So I don't like these changes. I think it's fantastic that we got cool redesigns, and maybe I will be proven wrong, but I think I'm not a fan of this one. The Ghost change, I think it's good that they nerf the Ghost. It's a really strong unit against both Protoss and Zerg. Against Protoss especially, the EMP radius will get reduced, which I think is a great change. Protoss is struggling against ghost armies, so that's a good change. I don't really would have nerfed the snipe damage. I maybe would have reduced their HP or somehow nerfed their survivability against Zerg. I think it's fine that they deal a lot of damage. They still do one-shot Vipers, etc. But maybe I would have taken a look at the HP. Either way, Ghost nerf in general is good design-wise, because you shouldn't give that much power to one unit in theory. So that's fine. We don't mind, no clue why they're buffing the unborrow time. So design-wise, I think this is, I don't know, meh. Target line being more visible is alright, I guess. The medevac minimap radius increased from 0.75 to 1. I don't know why it was that small to begin with, so I guess that's fine. This one, the extra upgrade, I think will be pretty useless. So design-wise, once again, I'm not the biggest fan. I don't think this honestly does anything. Raven, fantastic change, I think, here. I think it's really weird that you, ever since the last patch, you can make a Raven this fast, and then you can disable 2 Colossus with a push, and then push in. So this will make it a lot harder to do that kind of stuff. So very good change design-wise. Lurkers, I think design-wise, I should stop saying it. All of this is just design thoughts. I think it's good that there is a siege unit. It's supposed to be a siege, and you're not supposed to just run at your opponent and borrow them. So getting their movements bonus reduced is good, I think. And yeah, this is whatever. The Infestor is getting generally nerfed. I don't quite understand why, especially the fungal growth cast range is reduced, because Zerg is not too strong with Ghost Broodlord against Thor, with Infestor Broodlord against Ghost Thor. So if the radius from the EMP is reduced by 0.25. I don't understand how that transitions into a fungal growth cast range reduction from 10 to 9. Overall, it's alright, I guess. I'm not the biggest fan on this. This is the dumbest change I have seen. I don't know why this is here. It doesn't do anything, and I think it's hilarious that people are upset about it, but design-wise, I don't get it. This is not the issue at lower levels for people that use a Viper. If you want to change it for people that are at lower levels, you should give the Viper an auto attack. But once again, you don't really want to buff the Viper in general. But if you would want to have diamond players, the issue is that they make a Viper, then it flies in while they're doing some stuff, and it just dies first without casting any spells. And it's really expensive, so it's not good at that level. So that would be the fix to that. I don't think this helps anyone. This is just a meme. No one will ever make a Viper. Not make a Viper because they think, man, I don't have any buildings to suck. That's really weird. The Broodlord, they're obviously trying to gravitate to it being more of a Guardian, more of a mobile unit, but this is not mobile enough. 2.6 is not mobile enough. Also, its single target damage is not good enough, so it doesn't do what they want it to do. So I think I disagree with this. Obviously, I am a part of the balance council, but I'm not really doing that much. I'm just that's why I can completely disagree with some of the patches they're trying to go for. I don't really understand those brutalists by themselves are just not good enough. You can't really kite against anything necessarily, and yeah, the brutaling is getting a lot weaker, so it's not really good at what it used to do, and it's still not a guardian. So somewhere in between, kind of meh. The Overlord, this was really weird to use. Overlord Queen drops, ever since the Queens couldn't use their abilities anymore. I don't think this makes it broken. This just makes it better to use. So I think that's good because it took forever for the Overlord to stop and spread creep. So I think that's cool. This is this literally doesn't change anything. It's still so slow. First of all, I don't think anyone will notice a difference. And second of all, if your opponent is in position for an Overlord drop, they're gonna die. The Overlords before they unload anything. That's just how it works. The Overlords are not that fast. And 0.2 buff, 0.02 won't change. No, 0.2, sorry, won't change a thing. I am not a fan of this. Things that seem to buff something but that don't really do anything. Ultralisks, cost reduction by 25. I think this one is weird as well, honestly. This is not the problem of the Ultra. The cost is not the issue. But yeah, I guess it's a little bit better. I've never borrowed my Ultras to avoid anything, so I mean, I probably borrow an Ultra every now and again, but yeah, I don't think this really changes anything. Usually the cost of the Ultra is not the issue with the Ultra. That's not why we don't make Ultras. And it feels like a 300-200 unit, you know? Feels like similar to the Thor. So it's a weird deviation. So I'm not the biggest fan. The Hydra, I mean, the upgrades just took way too long. You need to make sure that it's not viable as an all-in at all. So they don't make it as one upgrade, but it just takes a little bit shorter time. It used to take 71 plus 71, so 142 seconds for Hydra to get both of their upgrades. It's faster to get a Hive up than to get the Hydra upgrades. Like, you can get a Lurker down if you can get a Lurker down, by the time the Hydras get both of the upgrades, you might as well not make any Hydras and just morph them into Lurkers. So this was always weird. I think this is a good change. The Baneling overall was very strong. So if the plan is to make the Baneling less powerful and give the powers to somewhere else, I agree with that design decision. One-shotting probes was really stupid, so that's fantastic in terms of design. So design-wise, I think this is good. Then all the upgrade changes are fine. I don't think we need to go over those. Minimap radius, not really relevant. Disruptor, it's a unit that can one-shot a lot of stuff. Feels like a spellcaster, doesn't feel like something that should be messable. So once again, without thinking or taking balance into consideration, I think this is a good change. The Tempest can now accelerate and decelerate faster. I think it's always important to think about high range units, that they have their clear downsides. I think the Tempest still has a clear downside, as in its HP and its actual stats are not that good. So it's a good thing to try out, I think it's fine. The Mothership entire redesign, I like it. Overall, I'm not going to go over it one by one, everything that changes, but I like it overall. I found the Cloak to be extremely annoying to play against, and a lot of other things now are buffed about it, so I think that's cool. The Sentry is like whatever. I feel like if you get EMP'd, you're still going to get EMP'd. I don't think you're going to pop Guardian Shield way before. It's just if you don't think there's a fight happening and you get EMP'd before you pop the Guardian Shield, you won't pop the Guardian Shield after this either. Oracle Stasis Ward side range increase. They want to give Protoss more map vision, so this is, I guess, to spot drops and run-bys. It's alright, I guess. It's a lot of energy, so I think it's okay. I don't really think you should buff Oracles in general, because it's like the best Protoss unit, but it's not really even a big buff. So yeah, here the Immortal, this is design-wise, I think, perfect, because I think it was supposed to be played, I think it was supposed to be this way to begin with, and the Voidry was most certainly supposed to be this way to begin with. This is just a bug fix. So nothing to talk about here. The Cyclone, alright, these are just the changes that they did afterwards. So they fixed some numbers on the Cyclones. I still think it is overtuned against Zerg. I still think it is not that useful against Protoss. And it's really weird you would need to redesign a lot of stuff. Like, you won't know how exactly this plays out until very long. So I think this is, I'm not the biggest fan of this in general. Like, I think the Cyclone is just not a reactorable unit. I think it's gonna break, it has a potential to break TvZ. Even if they end up being shit, I think they fulfill a fine role right now with being a very specialist, long-range, mobile mech unit that costs a lot. And then this, I don't think this does anything, but I don't know why they changed it back from a buff to just a bug fix. This one was just to You know, make sure that Protosses don't randomly die when they forget to scout. And the fungal growth damage now is a little bit more, like these changes are all very minor. So let's go over to the next part where I will talk about how all of these changes play out together, how I think they will play out together, and how it affects the balance of each matchup. So I wrote down all the changes that I think affect each matchup. If I forgot any, my apologies, but I just put them in a spreadsheet here really quick so I don't forget about anything. And then we can compare how they match, how the changes match up, basically, for one race and then against one race, to see if it ends up even, or if one race is ahead or one race is lagging behind, because obviously they stated at the beginning that the patch is supposed to help Protoss being more stable against Terran, mostly, and then take the strength away a little bit from Baneling, etc., and give it to some other units. And we'll see if they actually reached that goal in terms of balance now, or at least we're gonna try to see how it plays out. So the Zerg changes that affect Zerg and that are good for Zerg is that you get fully upgraded Hydras. This is against Terran, first of all, because this is, I think, actually the matchup that is affected the most out of the Zerg matchups, that I also understand quite easily how it is affected. So you get fully upgraded Hydras earlier. It's about 30 seconds earlier that you get them. I really don't think this changes anything because we're not playing Hydra timings against Terran. We just use them defensively. And usually we mostly play with Ling Bane at first and then get Hydras later on. So yeah, this is a slight buff for Zerg. Definitely I would buff, but a slight buff. You can get an Infestor with Fungal ready earlier. This is a buff to Cave Bob styles. Cave Bob, in case you don't know, is like Roach, Ravager, Infestor styles. Any style where you start with Roaches, you go into a fast hive. You usually make a couple of Infestors. Now you basically have the gas for one extra Infestor. And you have the Fungal ready 22 seconds earlier, which is the timing at which you usually would start an Infestor after you make Pathogen Glands, if you would make it. So it's either that or you just would still skip the upgrade and then you would just have the Fungal earlier, which is usually, I think, what you do in these styles. You don't actually get the Pathogen Gland, so you don't actually have one more Infestor, but rather you just have it earlier. Either way, it's a buff for those styles. So it's definitely a buff for those Roach Infestor styles. Then you have 25 more minerals in the bank for every Ultra that you make. Also, like a small buff usually if you make Ultras. The mineral bank is not the biggest issue, but it definitely is a buff. Like every single time Terran kills an Ultra, now it's 25 less resource lost for the Zerg. The Broodlord is faster, I put here. I think this is, I think this is unironically, I think it's without a question that the Broodlord nerf is heavier than the buff with the small speed buff because it still doesn't do anything by itself, but it can run away a little bit. It can run away better now from Thors. I mean, usually you shoot once and you still can run away before. But now I think it has the same movement speed as the Thor, so sure, you still can't run away from snipes, obviously. The Lurker upgrade costs 50-50 less. I think this is a joke because you make it as the second upgrade. I really don't like... The upgrade is really not that useful now, so I understand that they're making it less costly, but by the time I get my second Lurker upgrade, I really couldn't give less shits about having 50 resources of each less. So I put an XD on the changes that I think you can basically forget about. Like these are, they might as well not be here. Then the Drop Overlord is slightly faster. I think this is a joke as well. The Viper, I mean, this is the biggest one of them all. You can ignore these changes, honestly. They are not real changes that will affect any outcome of any game. Like if there's gonna be a late game, you can come back in a year from now and tell me, bro, there's a late game where the Zerg lost because he had 50 after a base trade because he didn't have... He was lacking 50 minerals to make a new hatchery, and that's why he lost the game. And then you can come back to me and tell me that I was wrong. But until then, I really don't think this will affect the outcome of any game. So yeah, that's why I put them on XD. Then bad, well, good for Zerg. Let's continue here. From the Terran point of view, is that the Ghost needs one more snipe to kill Ultras. I'll rephrase this because Ghost snipe does less damage. The only real interaction that it changes is against Ultras, where you now take, I think, 4 snipes instead of 3. And against Roaches that you can't one-shot anymore, but you're not really supposed to snipe Roaches. Because if you have Ghosts out and the other guy has Roaches, you're happy that the other guy has out Roaches because it's not better units. So realistically, from all the useful interactions, the only thing that I think changes is the Ultra. But obviously, if you snipe something and you don't get the second snipe off on a Lurker, a Broodlord, or a Queen, they now survive with more HP, which is definitely a buff for Zerg in this regard, right? It still one-shots Vipers because they put the plus psionic damage. Then the Widowmine targeting line is more visible. I have no clue if this will help me whatsoever, but because I also didn't implement it yet, so I can't even see it in the testing. Or if they did, then in that case, I think it's useless because I didn't see a difference. But yeah, so it's really hard for me to tell if this actually really helps. I kind of doubt it, but we'll see it. The EMP radius is being reduced by 0.25. So this will sometimes, I mean, usually if you get your infestors EMP'd, you get all of them EMP'd. There will definitely be instances where one infestor survives, or a couple of infestors are now not fully EMP'd. Like, not the biggest change. This is not really where Zerg wins the games. We're not, usually when we're playing with Broodlord Infestor, we lose the games most of the time, unless we're already really far ahead. So then, or ahead in general, then the Medivac minimap radius got increased. I don't really usually struggle with seeing Medivacs on the minimap, but I know that Protoss have complained about it, so maybe it helps me. And this is just something that I wouldn't really know. So these are definitely all good for Zerg, these changes, right? Then we go for the changes that affect Zerg badly. The Baneling now does 2 less damage versus light units per upgrade. So against Hellbats, it will deal in late game 6 less damage. Against Marines, in late game, it will deal 6 less damage. Against SCVs, 6 less damage. In mid game, it will be 4 less damage. Earlier on, it will be 2 less damage, etc. So this is just a damage nerf against a lot of very viable Terran units. The Baneling now has 5 HP less. Now this is a big change. And yeah, I think Planetaries now at a certain splash damage from the Planetaries one-shot, they said, which I think is wild, but obviously Terran units shoot Banelings, for example, a Marine. Now you need 1 less shot with a Marine, especially if they're up in upgrade, to kill a Baneling, which is huge because Marines fire very fast. They're very, very, very fast, and usually Terran is ahead in upgrades unless you go double upgrade before layer, in which case it's even most of the time. So this is a huge change. There's no other way around it. I forgot the Baneling upgrade is faster, but I think this is upgrade costs 50-50 less. I forgot about this one, I'm sorry. The Baneling now has 5 HP less. I mean, it's a huge change. No matter what way you look at it, there's always a combination of damages, and we make hundreds of Banelings, and more of them will die before they connect, because the Baneling is supposed to, like, it needs to survive until it gets there against ranged units. Obviously, its HP being less is a nerf to all the Baneling styles, which is basically everything we play, because even if we play Roach Ravager into Lurker, we go into Hydra Bane. Every single game right now is either Ling Bane, Mass Ling Bane, Ultra sometimes. Most of the time it's just Hydra Bane, Mass Hydra Bane, Viper in late game, and that's how we play, because we have to kill Terran, because we feel like we're, if we don't get ahead in bases severely, we can't win a late game against Terran. So we can't just sit back and go Broodlords. It basically never works when we do it, so that's why we mass Banelings, and that's why we attack. So nerfing that unit that we make hundreds of is like nerfing a Marauder for Terran, right? It is a huge nerf. So then the Lurker movement speed gets reduced. I think this is a pretty big nerf for the Lurker. I think it's a good nerf, by the way, but I think it's a pretty big nerf, because most of the time now you won't get away anymore from snipes. Unless you're already moving in one line. While the snipe is going off, you're not going to get away anymore. Before, Lurkers would get away more often, which is probably good design-wise, right? The Lurker is a siege unit. It's not supposed to get away from the snipe. But it's definitely a nerf in the Lurker versus Ghost interaction. I think I would rather have the snipe damage be the same and the Lurker be faster if I play Lurkers against Ghosts. So then the Broodlord now is worse in fights. It is significantly worse against Thors, because Thors, sometimes they lack the surface area to all attack at the same time. Now they can start a step forward a little bit better. Usually you also don't have perfect Broodling clear if the Hellbats ever die, because the Thors automatically will shoot the Broodlords once they're in range, and Thors have more range than Broodlords, which means whenever the Broodlords attack, basically Thors attack the Broodlords, and then sometimes they get stuck behind Broodlings. This is an obvious nerf for Broodlords. Very, like, it's definitely makes them worse. And then now fungal range is worse, which I think in, like, the Burrowed Infestors will basically remain the same, but in late game, where you try to fungal the Ghost from far away to cancel the snipes, is now quite a bit worse. It is one of the changes that I find very weird, because it's not really something that you would think of when you think Zerg is OP, is that the fungal has the same reach as AMP. So that's yeah, those are bad for Zerg. Then the mine unburrows twice as fast. No clue why or who put this there. It is literally like Clam just wrote the patch to me, but it is mine unburrows twice as fast. Okay, all right. Because that was an issue. And then the medevac upgrade, I put this as an XD, just like these changes, because it's irrelevant. And I can see a Terran making it when they open BC into Bio. And that's, I think, the only time. Where you already have it. But yeah, I still don't think it's that impactful. So it's an XD. Overall, I think the Baneling changes alone are a bigger nerf. Well, first of all, like, it's so funny because the Broodlord is faster, but it's worse. So this already is worse now for Zerg. Like, we're trying to put plus minus now, basically. You now have, like, the Ultras are 25 minerals better, and the Ultras are overall better, but Ultras are not that good to begin with, and that's not their issue. Their money is not their issue. We can get it faster with fungal ready earlier. Surviving is not our issue. This helps us survive against Terran pushes, which I don't think is really the biggest issue. If you play these styles, you want the Terran to push into you. That's basically what they counter anyways. And we can get the fully upgraded Hydras earlier. I think this is basically useless against Terran. I mean, it obviously, there will be situations where you have the extra range earlier and you will kill a medevac. So I'm not going to say it's useless in fights as well. Usually, you have both upgrades done anyways in relevant fights, because against tank pushes, you simply don't make Hydras once you scout there's tank pushes. But sure, like this is a buff. But these two alone, I think, are a bigger nerf than all of these combined. And I don't think it's close. For me, in general, the Lurker also obviously gets worse, the Broodlord gets worse, so the strength of the Baneling is not transferred to anything during the fight. There are upgrades that cost less now, so we have a little bit more money to make more units, which will maybe help us survive a push that we otherwise wouldn't in 1 out of 1,000 games. Or maybe even more. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the 4 extra banelings that we get because of it will help more so than the baneling nerf, for example, would be bad for us during these fights. But in general, the Baneling gets worse, the Lurker gets worse, the Broodlord gets worse, and the Infestor gets worse. So all of our AoE options get worse, as well as all the late game units. The only thing that gets, well, remains the same in terms of strength on the battlefield is the Ultralisk. So then we have to look at the Terran changes, what the compensation is. The compensation is the Ghost Snipe now does less damage. Still 2 shots Lurkers, still 2 shots Broodlords, still 1 shots Infestors and Vipers, but now takes 1 more shot to kill the Ultra. So, on the plus side, for Zerg overall, in terms of what actually decides if a trade is good or not, for us, we have that the Ghost Snipe is now worse. And on the negative side, the Baneling, the Infestor, the Broodlord, the Lurker are worse. The Ultra is cheaper, so I'll count it as a plus side as well in terms of trades, because it's obviously a better trade. So I mean, the Snipe already helps the Ultra. So yeah, the Ultras are better, the rest is worse. Now, I think it is very, 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 very difficult to argue how this is somehow good for Zerg, but I have seen people do it. So I'm obviously a biased Zerg pro gamer, a part of the Cabal and everything. But I think these changes overall are worse for Zerg. They're worse for Zerg. I'm not gonna say they're too bad or anything. I mean, if your goal was to make ZvT more favored for Terran, then I think this will have achieved that. If you think it was Zerg favored before, then maybe this is fine. Maybe this is too much. Maybe it's too little even. I'm not gonna be the judge of that, but I am here to tell you that from my point of view, with these changes, I don't see how they're supposed to be interpreted as beneficial for Zerg overall, if you take all of them combined. I really don't see it in any way, shape, or form. So that's for the ZvT matchup, which they didn't say initially that they wanted to nerf Zerg in a ZvT matchup, but maybe they did, because I think the community generally thinks that Zerg is too strong. So let's go to the ZvP changes. I just wanted to really quick add at this part The reason why I put the cyclone changes in bracket and why I'm not factoring them in, or whether or not this is good or bad, is because the cyclones so far have been insane against Zerg from the games that I've played against them, and I don't think they will make it into the game like this. So I feel like it's either going to get reversed or they will get significantly nerfed, and I won't be able to tell if this is good or bad for Zerg. And yeah, it's much easier to look at the entire picture just without this, because I really don't think it's going to make it into the game as a reactor unit with 12550. I simply don't think that is the case. For the ZvP changes, it's basically the same Zerg changes that are now make Zergs better and the same that make Zergs worse. And then for Protoss, these are new changes, is that the disruptor is +1 supplied. I don't think this is the biggest change against Zerg, because usually you just make a couple to be safe. And then you can obviously make more, like let's say you make 4 to 6 disruptors. I don't really think Protoss ever makes more than that. Then they have 6 less, let's say, probes, which is definitely a nerf. Then the warp prism radius increase, it's whatever. And then I put the mothership as good for Zerg as well, because this is very difficult to understand. But if you were ever a Zerg player that played against a good Protoss that controlled his mothership, you would never say that the mothership is a bad unit. It is literally the single strongest unit in late game in ZvP. And I would always rather have my opponent not rebuild the mothership or not build it at all. Literally always, under all circumstances, unless he's so broke that he can't do anything, like they can't do anything else. In normal late game scenarios, I would always rather have my opponent not have a mothership, because it makes positioning my army so extremely much easier, and it lets me get way more abducts. It lets me exactly know when I want to engage, because I just have vision on his army then. It's just so much easier. I see where his Templars stand, I see if there's carriers exposed, I see everything. And even though you get motherships abducted very often, usually if you get a mothership abducted, you would have otherwise gotten another unit abducted. And usually when the mothership's on the field very often, you would have gotten way more abducts than if it is off the field. It also tanks a whole lot, and it has recalls twice even. You can recall your entire army to the top. So let's say my entire ruler army is at the bottom. I'm ready for a fight. Now he recalls towards my main. We see this happen quite frequently. It's very powerful. It still has this, obviously. And now, back then you could recall the mothership to the bottom, and then the mothership could once again recall to the bottom. So even though I think it is, a lot of things got better for the mothership, like the time warp is way better now. You can cast it on Broodlords. I don't think you can avoid it with the Broodlords. There are things that are way better about it. I think the cloak alone, if everything else got buffed, the cloak alone, even though it's still there, the fact that it's not permanent anymore makes this better for Zerg. So I put this as a buff for Zerg. And things that are bad for Zerg are Tempest Acceleration, that is now better. The Oracle Stasis Ward side range, I really don't think this does a whole lot of anything. The Wide Back removed, I really don't think this does a whole lot of anything. Upgrades are now cheaper, I really don't think this does a whole lot of anything. I think all the things that are bad for Zerg honestly don't do a whole lot. So let's go over it again and compare the two sides, because the good side for Zerg is very good, but Protoss is considered weaker by most people. So let's take a look at how this actually affects Protoss players. So obviously this change is massive against Protoss. This change is also massive against Protoss. It will be many times where Banelings now die before they go through a storm. Basically, whenever you don't go in an absolute straight line, sometimes even if you go in a straight line, they randomly die. But if you try to pull back your Banelings, which happens all the time against Storm, you very often survive with like 1 HP on a lot of Banelings. This will not happen anymore. It also, like in a lot of different scenarios where different units hit the Banelings after a storm, like especially with splash damage, Colossus Stalker, what do I know? There's gonna be many more Banelings that die before they connect. This is obviously another big nerf. Lurker movement speed reduced. I doubt this really helps Protoss in a lot of cases, because Lurkers are honestly not that good in a lot of scenarios. And usually they're mostly good defensively, so I think this is not that bad. Broodlings are worse. I think this is worse against Terran. Like, it is a bigger nerf against Terran than it is against Protoss. But nonetheless, I think it makes them worse. The fungal range is lower. Like, if I had them ordered as in how important I think it is, I would put the fungal range is lower above the other two. Because you have, whenever there's a late game, especially with Tempest, but in general, the Protoss tries to position his High Templars in front of the carrier, preferably only one, so it doesn't get all of his High Templars fungal, but very often they just go in front with everything, and you get a fungal on all the High Templars, barely, like with the outskirts of your fungal, and very often you barely get a fungal, and you see there is no High Templar, And then you can abduct a unit because it can't retreat anymore because it's slowed. So then that interaction is actually quite a big nerf, in my opinion, in ZvP late game. So obviously the late game will be, I mean, overall the Broodlords are worse, the Fungal is worse, the Tempest is better. Late game will be a little bit worse for Zerg, I think. I really think the Mothership is overall good for Zerg, so that's why I'm saying I think. I think it's overall a little bit worse for Zerg because of the Fungal and Tempest, especially. But I do think the Mothership makes it a little bit easier. So honestly, I'm not that sure about it. But mid game obviously is much worse for Zerg. Like the Disruptor is not as relevant, the +1 supply, as the Baiting nerfs are. And the Hydra upgrades, when they were combined, I think there were strong Hydra timings that you could play, even without that fast of a lair, to be honest. So they're a little bit harder to scout for the Protoss, which makes them also stronger. Because now, I mean, if you want to do a Hydra All-in, you need to rush a lair. I still don't think Hydra upgrades, Hydra All-ins would be good at all now. The Queen All-ins are slightly stronger. I think this is honestly a bigger change than the Hydra one now, because they need to scout at least a little bit if there's an early lair and if there's 2 Overlords morphing into the Dropper Lords in case it's the German taxi. So this is, it makes it a lot easier to control. Like if there's a Void Ray, sometimes you just can't drop your Queens anymore and spread the creep because it takes forever. Against Stalkers, you can't. Still, Blink will defend everything, and I'm pretty sure you can defend everything without scouting in this pitch as well. So it's not the biggest thing. Ultra are cheaper, Broodlords are quicker. This definitely does help with against Protoss in particular with repositioning, because the Protoss army is also relatively small, especially once they have carriers. I think this is a bigger buff than it is against Terran. I think all of this is incredibly irrelevant against Protoss. Even the fact that Infestors spawn with Fungal, because you would always get the upgrades before you would get the Infestors. It's just one more Infestor, basically. It's another buff in terms of money. But overall, I really don't think any of this really matters. So overall, I think this is slightly better for Protoss, which now you can be the one to tell me if this is. I mean, it's definitely better for Protoss because of the Baneling, right? But you can tell me, do you think this is enough? Do you think this is not enough? Do you think this is too much? I personally don't think this is too much. I think this one is very debatable. I don't have enough information on how exactly all of this will play out, but it's obvious to me that this is worse for Zerg by a lot, and I didn't know that ZvT was considered bad for Terran necessarily. So let's get to the last matchup, which is not my home matchup. It's TvP. Here, I mean, if you just look at what is good and what is bad for TOS, it paints a picture of what was intended. But if you actually take a look at the changes themselves, it is exactly what the community memes about. So let's go into it. The Immortal EMP interaction is probably the biggest buff for Protoss here. The other buffs are all very, 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 very minor. I'm not sure how much Mothership is even going to come into play. The upgrade cost reduction is for shield and I mean air armor. Those are not really necessary against Terran to begin with. The nerf for Protoss is that the Disruptor now costs 1 more supply. That's a big nerf because Protoss is playing Disruptor heavy in mid game, so they want to go away from that. I honestly expected them to buff the Colossus as compensation because they want to move away from the Disruptor, so they give them something else. Let's just ignore the minimap radius for now. But the biggest buff for Protoss is obviously the EMP and the Raven nerf. Those are huge. There's no way around it. Those are actual big buffs for Protoss. So now the question is this, the EMP nerf, the Raven nerf, the Immortal EMP interaction, good enough, together with the Disruptor nerf, to make Protoss more stable against Terran? Because those win rates are the biggest concerns, apparently, in the community. And once again, this is not my home matchup. Usually I refrain from just talking about it. I am obviously, like, I would be top 50 Grandmaster with both Terran and Protoss, and I understand the matchup to a certain degree, but I wouldn't say enough to say how exactly this will make the matchups look. This is definitely good for Protoss. Like there's no way this is overall bad for Protoss, because the Raven pushes were super strong, EMP is super strong. So like now they can play a little bit more Immortal centric. Can maybe add in a couple less Disruptors. Maybe you have, let's say, 2 to 4 Disruptors in your army now, and now instead you like you keep more immortals in the army. Maybe those are better. Maybe they're just generally fine because they get a better early game, and then usually very often early game snowballs in StarCraft. So if they fall behind because of a Raven opener, because of the Raven pushes, then obviously it makes them look worse later on. So are those changes really needed? I'm not entirely sure. Like, this is just these for me are my as objective as possible analysis of if a thing is good or bad in a certain matchup. I think the ZvT changes overall favor Terran quite a bit. I think the ZvP changes favor Protoss a little bit. I think the TvP changes favor Protoss a little bit. Obviously, I think it's going to make Protoss better in both matchups. I don't know if it's enough. I can't tell you the future, but we'll definitely see. So now to my favorite part of this video. It will be me reacting to the concerns that the community has. The first concern is that this patch is actually an overall nerf to Protoss. And some even said it is a buff to Zerg. Now this is why I made the last part of this video, so you guys can see how you logically try to make out who is the winner or loser of the patch. But you need to talk about all the options. But then when I check on the forums, you have people like, in this case, River HS, which is coincidentally also the same person here, that either give disingenuous memes or they don't read the entire thing, or they just don't actually understand the changes. I don't know what it is, but if you end up with this patch being a nerf for Protoss, that's weird. You can tell me that you think this patch is not enough for Protoss. I think that's, I mean, that's an opinion. That's a fair opinion to have, but you can't say that this patch is an overall nerf. So I'm just gonna read through this meme. He says overcharge nerf, disruptor nerf. Obviously not mentioning anything else there. Protoss players are just worse, but we will buff the race Pinky Promise. Disruptor nerf, Hydra buff, Cyclone buff. This is supposed to be the current patch. And then Mega Cyclone buff, Void Ray nerf. Void Ray nerf. So he completely ignores the double Baneling nerf, the Lurker nerf, the Broodlord nerf, the Infestor nerf, the EMP nerf, and the Raven nerf. He effectively ignores all of those and just says the Disruptor is getting nerfed. I can't believe it. These guys suck at the Balance Council. So then we have this, which is another meme by him, where he posts a screenshot of the two Protoss players losing in the playoffs, at a Balance test tournament. This is on maps that we've never played before, and it's us trying out the new stuff for the first time. This is not how the Balance will play out. Single results, even if this was on our normal map pool, and even if they prepared for it, you can't tell Balance from singular results. It just doesn't make sense. And I also don't understand how he shows Spirit beating MaxPex 3-2, Solar beating Skillus 3-1, which isn't even an upset, but not any other results. For example, every single Zerg lost against every single Cyclone game, I'm pretty sure. Well, Zerg just didn't beat Terran in general in this tournament, and I'm not complaining about it. That's okay, you know, we're just trying out stuff. We're just learning the new patch. This is the first time for us to try out this stuff seriously. So yeah, I thought that was really weird. I think the people that generally say this is bad for Protoss maybe should revisit all the changes and generally think about if this actually is an overall nerf for Protoss. Because you can't just look at all the Protoss changes and then say, because if you just look at the Protoss changes in PvT, then the Disruptor nerf is as big as all the buffs. But there is an EMP buff, EMP nerf, and a Raven nerf, which you need to factor in as well. That's just not how Balance works, how people do it. So that's the first thing I wanted to point out. So then the next thing I wanted to talk about, it's not here right now, but I see it a lot because I'm a Zerg streamer and people obviously say this a lot as a counter argument for everybody that says Protoss really needs a buff, is I constantly see people saying, but the Protoss players are just not as good. And StarCraft is a game with asymmetric balance, which means we have different races that are completely different from one another. So it's impossible to tell in a game between a Zerg and a Protoss who is the deserved victor. Like you can't say, okay, in Cyril versus Creator, Cyril won because he's, you know, you can't with 100% certainty say that he deserved the win, for example. So people constantly say the Protoss players are not good enough, which I think should be said less in general because it's disrespectful to the Protoss players, but I see it consistently. So the argument always goes, all of the good Protoss players retired. It is a lot of good Protoss players that retired. It is Zest, Trap, Stats, SOS, Deer, Neeb, and I'm forgetting one more, but it doesn't really matter. Parting, I forgot Parting, who I think would be sick in the last year in the hero meta plus the Forgate Soccer, but I'm going off track. If all of these players were consistently playing, there's no chance that it still would just be one Protoss always in the round of 8. And that is true. I don't disagree with that, but that's not the status quo. The status quo we have right now in StarCraft is that Protoss is underperforming with the Protoss players that we have, and we have to balance the game around it. You have to understand that it is necessary for the community to have a healthy scene, that it is necessary to have Protoss players performing reasonably well at big tournaments. And it doesn't matter if you think that one player is worse than the other. And you guys can argue forever if you think X player is actually worse than the other one and he doesn't deserve to get Y result. And you can argue that till death, because in the end you can't tell who deserves to win. Most people that watch, even if I'm watching a super pro game, I can't always tell if a player is on point. Like if I have a bad day and I'm misclicking a lot, I will lose against players that are much worse than me. But you will never ever see that. But then you can't use it as a balance argument, because I lost because I played bad, but you won't see that. Likewise, won't you see that the Zerg player might have played bad but still won, or sometimes the Protoss lost because he just played bad, because all of this happens, which makes the entire balance argumentations so weird. But nonetheless, we need, for a healthy scene, we need a better Protoss representation, so we do need Protoss buffs, no matter if you think that the Protoss players are worse than the other races. Now, because it is so difficult to say which player deserves to win, Monk famously he said it at some podcast, and it keeps getting repeated to me over and over again. Monk said that the community, well, the game should be balanced around the... I might also be misquoting this because people just keep writing it to me, so I'm sorry. My apologies, Monk, if you didn't actually say this. But the game should be balanced around what the community thinks, basically. So to keep the community happy, and the community overall will then get their wishes in terms of balance. I think you should not ever say this openly if you're a game designer, because it has the very negative effect that all the balance whining content creators profit from their balance whining, because obviously if there's a Terran streamer that has 2,000 viewers while there's a 4 TvT GSL going on, who's telling all of his viewers that no, actually Terran is really bad, and Terran actually is the one that needs buffs. Obviously, the people are going to come out of this believing him because he obviously knows better than them. He plays the game better, he understands the game, so people will believe him. I don't think content creators should be incentivized to balance whine on their streams. I think balance whining is generally pretty toxic. I think it is important to factor in the community happiness and what the community thinks in general, but it shouldn't be everything. It shouldn't be the ultimate measurement of how exactly you want to balance the game. In my opinion, if you have different opinions, you can tell me in the comments below. Now to the next point, which is brought up all the time, because now obviously the Balance Council is the group of people, which is basically most of the pro gamers who are balancing the games, and people are saying that, well, they are biased towards their own race, so they can't come up with a good patch because obviously they just want to buff their own race. There's an obvious conflict of interest there, and everybody just wants to buff their own race. And this is obviously true. You know StarCraft pro gamers, most of them are balanced, even if they're trying not to be. Everybody will have their own biases. And in the end, the way this is balanced out is by the fact that the pro players have to agree on a patch that seems fair to everybody. You first try to lay out the goals. This is also what they did in the balance patch. They said, okay, Protoss needs help at the pro level. So they have that goal in mind, and then they try to figure out changes that make that happen. And everybody has to agree, which means it doesn't matter if all of them are biased. In the end, everybody needs to come together and somehow suck it up. At one point or another, is it the perfect system? I don't think so. But it is, just because most pro players are biased doesn't mean that you can't get nerfs for a certain race, because all of the races are represented in the Balance Council. And yeah. So then the newest point that came up very frequently is that pro players shouldn't be designing the game because they're not game designers. They're not professional game designers, so they don't know what makes a good RTS, etc. I haven't really seen the best examples of this, but basically people were complaining about identities of a certain unit, but most people use this as an excuse for saying the programmers are doing a terrible job of balancing the game. Not even necessarily saying they're screwing up a lot of the designs of the units. I, for example, wouldn't like the new design of the Cyclone. So, you know, this happens from time to time where I also think, hey, this could have been better, but whatever. We're not game designers. It's true. We're not professional game designers, but we are probably, or as in we, the pro gamers, are the people that understand what the balance patches will do eventually the best. Most certainly better than the people on Reddit overall. And we had professional game designers before, and they always would also ask the pro players for advice and then act on that feedback and go for balance changes in the end. You know, in the end, obviously, they were the deciding factor. So in the recent history, I just want to show you guys, because I feel like everybody just forgot what the game designers left us with. The actual professional game designers, they gave us the most broken infested Terran I have ever seen that just could kill a Skytos army by itself. You could just mass infestors and it will beat every Skytos army. Then after that, we had an insane Nidus. We had Nidus Foremost, where whenever they made Nidus so cheap and so fast to build that whenever you wouldn't be making a Nidus, you were making a mistake, because you could constantly just pop up new Nidus worms, and the moment the other guy made a mistake, it wasn't unbeatable, but the moment the other guy made a mistake, it was over, so it was not fair. And then the most recent patch, the very last patch that the designers left us with, was the Void Ray patch, where they triple buffed the Void Ray. And I, for over a single year straight, had to play every single game against 2 Stargate Void Ray into straight late game. Every single game against Protoss. And I play 70% of my later games against Protoss. So every single game, I'm sitting here playing against 2 Stargate Void Ray, a build that is safe against everything, that gives a free late game. It wasn't broken or anything. It wasn't too strong, but it was foolproof. It was not well designed. It came to the point where I think the Muslim, when he off-raced a little bit, his Protoss got as high MMR as his Terran did, because all he did against Zerg was Skytos, and all he did against Terran was Void Ray Shield Battery all in. And now you're telling me that these game designers are also perfect because they're doing it professionally. I mean, every game designer just usually plays the game at some point and then, you know, has experience in terms of gameplay, and sometimes they designed other games first, but everybody needs to start somewhere. I don't think anyone here is perfect. It's not a very easy task. I don't think the pro players are perfect. I don't think this is the perfect solution to all of this, but I don't like that everybody's just acting like, okay, if we had professional game designers, all of a sudden everything would be way better, because it just wasn't the case. And now here is a comment that I wanted to talk about in particular, because it actually mentions me by name, so I just wanted to point it out here. It said, the first guy said, I don't even need to see the responses to the patch after watching Harrison's video. He's probably the most funny, chill person in the community, and he's very visibly annoyed with how dumb the hot takes on the patch are. And then the next guy said, dude can be, this is much more upvoted by the way, dude can be wrong too. Lambo defended the last patch and said that all the people arguing that the patch nerfed TOS don't play the game. Then TOS got murdered in all tournaments. I really don't like such elitism. This is more upvoted than this, which means this is the more popular opinion from the guys that browse Reddit and decide to give their upvotes to someone. So I want to explain that it is very easy to get emotional as a player reading these Reddit statements, because in general, balance whiners, they do multiple things. One of them is invalidate wins of basically whoever wins, because whoever wins is the broken race. But it also just doesn't seem quite fair. The comments don't quite seem fair. Harrison was visibly upset because a lot of people just wrote really random comments, like the Widowmine is getting buffed. We're complaining about it from a Protoss point of view, which the Widowmine did not actually get buffed against Protoss. For example, this is just an example, and this happens all the time. I just want to say that you guys, first of all, I didn't defend the last patch as in saying that Protoss wasn't getting worse against Terran. I said Protoss wasn't getting worse against Zerg. And I think most Protosses agreed with that. And even to this day, most Protosses think that PvZ is fine. Pro players, that is, not the community. So that's what I said. And I also said that Zerg won't be super broken against Terran. Because I'm not sure if you guys remember this, but the last time we released the patch, everybody thought the patch was insane for Zerg. Terrible for Protoss and Terran, but insane for Zerg. The biggest thing that changed was PvT. The one thing that I did not actually talk about, so this is not exactly, these are not exactly my words. I didn't think that, okay, Protoss wouldn't, I honestly didn't think Protoss would get results quite this poorly, because Hero did really well before, and now Hero is doing a lot worse. This can have a certain number of reasons, but I never talked about TvP in the past, because even though I'm a 6000 MMR player with both Terran and Protoss, and I play TvP quite frequently, I don't understand the game to that degree where I can confidently make predictions upon how balance changes will affect the overall outcome of the matchup. Now, when I looked at the past patch, I was pretty sure it was very good for Terran, but I still did not want to talk about it because I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to be wrong in my predictions. So then people in general talk about the bad resume that all the Balance Council has, all the big mistakes that we made so far. So I want to just remind you guys that we were left with a Void Ray patch. I want to just go through the full history now, because we were left with a Void Ray patch, and I said from the get-go, even though that was very negative for myself, because I beat everybody with Queen Walks, and that besides Zest and Max Specs. These two could defend all of my Queen Walks. Well, I actually beat Zest even with a Queen Walk in Katowice, but most people I could basically beat with Queen Walks, and I told you that ground is going to come back the moment we nerf the Queen Walks. Back when we released that patch, the most common Zerg responses was, man, we're just going to see Skytos more, because now we can't Queen Walk the Sky builds anymore, right? You need Queens to counter the Sky builds. But that's just because you wouldn't get the general idea. Queen Walks were actually really good, especially against Stargate into ground, which Stargate is always the best opening because it gives ground map control. A free third base, which they kind of have with every build, but it's the Oracle is just insane over time. So this was always the best, but Stargate into ground was super difficult against hatchery-based Queen Walk builds. I even made a YouTube video about this before even the patch dropped. And everybody told me I was wrong. Everybody said, oh, this is terrible for... this is terrible because we're going to see even more Skytos. And people said, okay, now it's even worse for Protoss because they can't play Void Rays anymore. And the ZvP meta has changed positively, drastically. It got so much better. So I thought that was a win maybe for the Balance Council, but no one's talking about that. That's fine, right? Then the next patch happens, and I just want to show you guys the responses of this patch. This was the patch that supposedly broke TvP, but no one was actually talking about TvP. All the people were talking about was how Zerg was going to be insanely broken. How there was no chance that Zerg was ever going to lose at Katowice, because this patch was implemented relatively shortly before Katowice. We knew about it for over 2 months, I think we already practiced on it, but yeah, it was implemented officially into the game too shortly before Katowice, which is stupid. The pro player Balance Council can't do anything for that. It's not our fault, but people were only talking about the Zerg Cabal. So these are the patch notes, and I'm just going to go through some of the comments, because this is what actually the community wrote, and this is what I was responding to. What this guy is referring to is my responses to the community response. Obviously, I'm also going to get emotional there. So, Cyril, Rainer, or Dark, who's winning Katowice? This was just a general view that was accepted. All of these are highly upvoted comments. I want to congratulate Zergs for the 7th World Championship in a row. When we inevitably get a ZvZ finals, we need to push hard for a reversal of the patch and a public apology from the Balance Council. You know what's funny? We got a TvT finals. Not a single one of these people actually said that they might have been wrong. Not a single one. They all thought that Zerg was going to be extremely broken against Terran. And it just kept going like that. It just kept going like that. We in the Zerg Cabal forced it in before Katowice. There were generally people at this era that thought that a conspiracy, a strong group, a hidden group as in the Zerg Cabal existed and had power over DSL to put in these changes. There were like some conspiracy theorists here. It was, yeah, probably the least excited I've been for Katowice in years. I like Rainer, Sarah, so I'm sure I'll get excited as it starts, but the ZvZ is going to be boring eventually. 7 Zerg Katowice round of 8, let's go. The Zerg lobbyists win again. And then there were even comments against me. I will laugh so much when Lambo still gets eliminated in the group stage. And what ended up happening was Terran won the tournament, Terran won the GSL afterwards, I think Hero won the Pigsty tournament, or no, I think it was Max Specs. And then now afterwards, more recently, Zerg won most of the tournaments. Still, Maru won in Korea, the GSL, but Protoss is struggling, right? But this was not just about Protoss. It's not like the community was sitting here telling me that Protoss was so weak. It was everybody saying that Zerg was all of a sudden going to be extremely overpowered against Terran. The patch didn't actually change that much. It was such a safe patch, the one before, in terms of all the Zerg matchups. Nothing really changed that much. And that's what my initial response was to, and it can be very frustrating. I'm already getting emotional again, and it can be super frustrating, and that's why you will find me saying stuff that will go off as very elitist, but yeah, I do think I know better than most of these people on Reddit, because they have been wrong over and over again, but they always just say, they just talk about the stuff that they remember negatively. They don't actually say, okay, this is actually better. Because I remember the patch, it basically nerfed Mutas with the Archon buff. The Hydras got buffed slightly, which didn't really affect ZvP that much. The High Templar movement speed got buffed. What else was there? The Ravager. Let me find it. The Ravager got nerfed. The Broodlord got nerfed. The Ultralisk got buffed. The Viper couldn't abduct 2 units at a time anymore, so that was a nerf. And the Disruptor got nerfed and the Shield Battery got nerfed, which are not the biggest changes against Zerg. They're much bigger against Terran. So, like the issue is whenever I read stuff like this, and this is the reason why I have this in incognito mode, by the way. It's not because I did something naughty and forgot to go off incognito mode. It's because I have Reddit Starcraft blocked on my PC, because it's not good for my mental health. I used to actually watch comments because there were some people that really hated me, and it motivated the shit out of me. It was so nice for me to watch people hate on me, because then I was like, okay, I need to prove them wrong right now. I would use it as fire to practice harder and more. But the more of this balance wine that I saw, the more that my overall goal to win Katowice, which I practiced extremely hard for, I practiced 30 games a day. I practiced with the same 5 Terrans every single day, 5 games each. I analyzed all the replays. I played, on top of that, some games in the other matchups to keep it fresh. I basically played Starcraft the entire day before Katowice, just in order to get out of my group and have a chance at winning the championship. That's my big dream, to win a big international event, right? But the thing is, I know the moment I advance, people are just going to use it to balance wine. And the moment I advance, I won't be able to watch back the Twitch really, because people are just going to whine about Zerg there. All I'm going to see is that I'm going to get invalidated, because the only reason people think that I'm advancing is not the hard work that I put in, it's not the skill that I show, it's not the preparation I put in. No, it's because my race is broken. And that is just very sad to think about. So I want to not think about that. That's why I have Reddit blocked, for example. And that's why I don't even know why people attack me here personally. You know, there's even more people that just think that this is... Yeah, I don't think it's good either for Protoss or Terran. It's just a very Zerg favored patch, which I don't think the Zerg matchups really changed a whole lot. Yet people were just constantly crying about Zerg so much that obviously I'm gonna say, yeah, most of these people don't play StarCraft. I do think most of these people don't play StarCraft, but that was not my entire point. My entire point is that these people don't understand the game to the degree where they know exactly what everything, how everything will play out. Not even I can tell you how everything will play out. I just did my best today to show all of you how I think it will affect the matchups. I think Protoss is better off in both matchups. I think Zerg is worse off in both matchups. If it's enough, I don't know, to help Protoss. If anything is wrong here, I'm not entirely sure. I'm usually playing it on a relatively safe side when I talk about this stuff. And usually on my stream, I just don't talk about balance, because I think it never leads to fruitful discussions. So I will probably also not do it in the future. This is a very, very special video because of it. And yeah, it probably went quite long, and I probably talked about the same stuff a little bit too frequently. So if you guys like this, you can let me know. If you even made it this far, you can let me know, because it probably went way longer than I wanted it to. I honestly wanted to rush through, but I get emotional just talking about this. So overall, in the end, you guys can let me know how you guys like the patch. I am genuinely interested, because I do think community feedback is important. It's just not... Like, the most upvoted Reddit comment might not always be the best or 100% right either, you know? That's all I'm saying. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. No balance videos anymore, because this one was hard for me already. See you guys. Bye-bye.